Have you ever wondered why so many bodybuilders slave away in the gym for years without seeing real gains, while a select few seem to unlock massive growth with far less effort? In this deep dive into Mike Mentzer's 1998 seminar, we'll challenge the myths of instinctive training and explore why logic, not gut feelings, is the key to building a physique like a pro. If you're tired of spinning your wheels and want exclusive breakdowns of heavy-duty training that could transform your results, hit that subscribe button now and turn on notifications for Muscle Maven and join thousands of serious lifters getting the edge they need. Question 1. You say your seminar has 3 parts? Why should we believe this setup is going to lead us anywhere meaningful in bodybuilding? What's your actual plan here?
Let me start by indicating that there's going to be 3 parts to this seminar. An introductory 10 minutes where I kind of get you mentally warmed up, if you will, for the theoretical material to follow. Then there's going to be a listing of an actual concrete training program and a break whereafter Brian Johnson's going to do a practical. So let's just get started here with the introductory material. While I will be providing you today with an actual training program, actually later in the seminar, I want you to know from the outset, ladies and gentlemen, that my purpose today, my primary purpose, is to teach you something meaningful, of value, that is, about a logical approach to the subject of productive bodybuilding exercise.
Question 2. You keep harping on about logic, but seriously, why do you think logic is such a big deal in bodybuilding? Isn't it just about sweating and lifting heavy?
Logic is, after all, man's method of gaining knowledge, which is his means of survival and is therefore of most fundamental value in human existence. Man is not an instinctual creature, as you've been reading about in especially the Weeder magazines. Instincts cannot coexist in a creature whose fundamental defining characteristic is his conceptual or cognitive faculty, which can only be used by a volitional choice. Now, don't let some of these words frighten you. You came here to learn something today, hopefully of value. Where words are new, don't be afraid. Write them down and look them up later on. You might find that they will prove of great value in your future thinking and learning. Instincts, audience, are a form of knowledge that is hardwired into animals and therefore guides them not volitionally by choice, but automatically and unerringly. Man is a conceptual being who gains and uses knowledge only through an act of choice, a process of thought, or a volitional cognitive effort, as stated previously. And it is because one must exercise his power of choice, his effort of will to initiate and sustain a process of thought that many just refuse to do it. They apparently find the effort involved too much or not to their liking. As a humorous side note here, years ago when I was working for Joe Weeder out at his offices in Woodland Hills, one of his top editors and I were joking about the Weeder instinctive principle when my cohort had me cracking up saying, Mike, people were to follow their instincts. Here they wouldn't lift weights at all, they would defecate and urinate on them. Wasn't that funny, huh?
Question 3. You're saying our culture is anti-rational? Do you really think bodybuilders are so lost they can't think for themselves?
Having been brought up in an anti-rational culture, many are not taught to value logic and thus never achieve what I refer to as intellectual self-sufficiency. That is, the ability to think logically, rationally, and to judge independently for yourself. What's the use, ladies and gentlemen, of having muscles that would do credit to an adult gorilla when you can't even think effectively about a subject like bodybuilding, which is of passionate concern? Most people have uncritically accepted faith as a means of knowledge. Faith, in fact, is the opposite or the antithesis of reason. It is literally the blind acceptance of ideas for which there is no sensory proof or rational evidence. Along with the idea that you should judge not, you also hear the other admonition, keep an open mind. The idea that one should not judge or that he should keep an open mind is actually very dangerous, literally. It is used to keep you confused by suggesting it is a virtue to plausibility to everything. Obviously, everything can be true. Since some ideas you read about contradict other ideas, how can they all be true? Simple logic. And remember, that's what my purpose is here today. In addition to providing you with an actual training program, I'd like to teach you at least something of value about a logical approach to bodybuilding. No, you should not be concerned with developing an open mind, but an active mind, one that treats ideas critically, seeking to distinguish truth from falsehood. The approach of most bodybuilders to training from the start amounts to little more than a blind leap into the dark. Throughout life, we all, you and I, everybody, were inundated by innumerable theories on every subject, from religion to philosophy, to politics, to the healing arts, nutrition, and bodybuilding science.
Question 4. You claim bodybuilders are confused, but why do you think it's their fault? Aren't the magazines and big-name trainers leading them astray?
And because so few in our culture were taught to think rationally or to judge critically, most of us are left disconcertingly confused when confronted with the necessity of making intellectual choices, such as which training theory to employ. In fact, how many bodybuilders, how many people do you know, honestly, possibly including yourself, and I was this way at one time, how many people are not confused on the subject of how to approach bodybuilding exercise? You were confused. Good for you. You're one of the rational few. In fact, I did realize I was like this when I was in my late teens. Most symptomatic was the notion that if something was printed, it had to be true. I learned later that my notion was illogical, as of course not every idea can be true, as I said earlier, because so many of them conflict with and contradict other ideas. In fact, it was Art Jones, who many of you know, or know of, who divested me of that bit of ragtag illogic when he literally barked at me, and that's the way he talks to everyone. Mike, goddammit, just because something is printed doesn't mean it's true. In fact, 90% of what is printed on all subjects is outright hogwash. And now, some 25 years later, some considerable thought, a lot of study and experience later, I realized that Mr. Jones was in fact being charitable. It's not 90% of what is printed on all subjects is outright hogwash. It's closer to 98%, literally. 98% of what you read. Remember, we do live, that is you and I, as Canadians and Americans, we live in a semi-free country. Can you imagine you imagine all the editors and publishers and writers of all the magazines stay up burning the midnight oil, searching the truth in everything they write? Of course not. Understanding this, audience, is a first step towards developing your critical ability. Your critical ability. The concept of critical ability is new to some people. Like I suggested earlier, you're here today to learn. Just because you hear new concepts, new terms, things that might be unfamiliar, don't just bypass them or let them scare you. Write them down and think about them later and incorporate them into your thinking.
Question 5. You say this seminar is about the mind, not just the body. Do you honestly think bodybuilding needs this much philosophical fluff?
As much as this seminar is about the human body and its improvement, this seminar is actually more about the human mind and its improvement. Why? Why would a seminar on bodybuilding also be about the mind? Because obviously, logically, you don't have to be a genius. We all know this on some level of awareness. Human intelligence, not instinct, is what makes it possible to understand anything at all, including exercise or bodybuilding science. And that which is most interesting to all of us, namely us, we the member of the species man. As someone once said, the divine spark in the great chain of being. We human beings are the highest of all living species on earth. It has been averred all too often by many, even those in the bodybuilding field, that we bodybuilders are dumb and stupid, which simply isn't true, as evidenced by the number of phone calls I receive every single day, all day long, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. I receive phone calls every day from people from all walks of life, including physicists, doctors, chemists, stockbrokers, students, tradesmen, truck drivers, people who were obviously very productive, quite bright and intelligent, who also just happen to be bodybuilders. I will not talk down to you today on the assumption that you, the audience, so lack intellectual depth that you are incapable of exercising the mental effort required to integrate knowledge of a higher order. Nor will I insult your intelligence by expecting you to accept anything that I, Mike Mentzer, have to say merely because I won a handful of bodybuilding contests. So what? Big deal. We have scores of bodybuilders who have won more contests than I have, and they couldn't even spell or define the word exercise science. It is only on the basis of grasping the logic of that one should agree as to whether or not it's true. Nor will I bore you with the type of intellectual pablum or baby food you've read so often in some of the muscle magazines. Just in case you hadn't noticed, the vast majority of articles written on the subject of training consist of little more than a series of arbitrary, biblical-like commandments. Thou shalt perform of this exercise, and thou shalt perform 5 sets of that one. Why? Never any reason. Blank out. No logic, no explanation.
Question 6. Why are you so obsessed with the intellect and the mind? Isn't bodybuilding just about hitting the weights and building muscle?
You see, audience, the realm of the intellect, the human mind, which again is the central focus of today's thought, is much more demanding than the average bodybuilding writer realizes or recognizes. And formulating a valid, non-contradictory theory of training requires knowledge not just of human physiology, but man's method of gaining knowledge, again, logic. A mere passionate discharge of the arbitrary contents of one's subconscious onto a piece of paper is just that, intellectual vomit. As a man of reason, I act on the basis, or I seek to act only on the basis of understanding the reasons for doing something at all, which is the way all human beings should proceed. And that once again is what this seminar is about. I'm not here just to give you another training program and expect you to blindly follow it. Would that be worth the $40 and the time you expended to come here today? This seminar is about a reasoned, principled, logical approach to the subject of productive bodybuilding exercise. One that can be understood by anyone, everyone willing to exercise the required mental effort. I presume, after all, that you came to Mississauga today because of your enthusiastic desire to achieve your muscular potential, maybe for personal reasons, to be Ontario, the Canadian champion. There might even be those in here who aspire to be Mr. Olympia. And, most important, that you, the audience, already understands that the basis of a rational, logical approach to bodybuilding or any other arena of human endeavor is the recognition that only the specific appropriate knowledge can lead you to engage in the purposeful action required to successfully achieve a goal. In fact, that's my favorite statement in the whole seminar. I'm going to repeat it. The basis of a rational, intelligent, logical approach to exercise or any other arena of human endeavor is the recognition that only the specific, appropriate knowledge can lead you to engage in the appropriate action required to achieve a goal. We all kind of sort of know that on some level of awareness, but if you don't explicitly state it periodically, it kind of loses impact in your own thinking. You're here to gain specific knowledge. No, the material in today's seminar is not infinitely complex, but it's not intellectual pabulum either. I am asking you, cast aside all your other concerns for the next few hours. Get intense mentally. Focus on the logic of my ideas, and once and for all, clear up any and all confusion. That won't be a problem for you since you're already unconfused, and that's fine. I'm not laughing at you. It's no fun being confused, is it? Or uncertain. Then, audience, you will be able to proceed with the greatest power available to a human being. The power of certainty. One of my favorite words, intellectual certainty. Not muscular power, but the power of certainty, which can only be gained when you truly grasp, fully recognize the power of ideas, the realm of the intellect.
Question 7. You want us to think logically? Do you really believe you can change how we think and not just hand us another cookie-cutter workout plan?
There does exist a viable intellectual discipline, exercise science. In the next section, remember, this is merely introductory, I will explain the logically interdependent hierarchy of ideas that makes up the context of bodybuilding science, again, so that you, the audience, will leave here not with just one more exercise program, but the ability to think more clearly, logically about the subject, and go on to confidently and successfully achieve your bodybuilding goals and your goals. In fact, while learning to think logically about bodybuilding, you'll learn something about the nature of thought itself, which you can then extend to other areas of life and lead a more rewarding and more fulfilling life overall. Before concluding this introductory section, audience, I'd like to address one important point that will serve, in fact, as a direct prelude to the next part of and it has to do with the near universal confusion that exists with regard to the fact that there can only be one valid theory of proper, productive bodybuilding exercise, or any other subject for that matter. This subject is centrally responsible for most of the failures in bodybuilding, and I can tell you unequivocally, without any slightest doubt or uncertainty, more bodybuilders fail to achieve their goals than succeed. Most bodybuilders, probably most of you in here like I did at one time, I'm not putting you down, wherever you're at with your thinking, most of you, I was there at one time too, but I'm a little bit older than most of you and I've had more experience. I've learned a lot in the last 20 years. Most bodybuilders make the mistake of approaching the subject of bodybuilding training with the idea that all theories have some merit or are of equal value. Then they waste precious time frantically looking into all these different theories, hoping that somehow, someday, some way, they'll find one that works. And as a result, literally, I'm not exaggerating here for effect, I talk to bodybuilders every day from all over the world, literally every day, all day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and I do a lot of seminars. The most salient characteristic of the vast majority of bodybuilders I meet is that they are confused and the confusion results in their not achieving their goals. Most bodybuilders literally fail to achieve their goals, which is why they're perpetually asking questions of anybody and everybody they can. They come to seminars all the time. You know what I'm talking about. Again, how many bodybuilders do you know who are not impotently bewildered, disconcertingly confused? At least 99%. In fact, it could not possibly be true that all, or many, or even two training theories are of equal merit. You have to keep in mind here what a theory is. A theory is a set of abstract principles which purports to be either a correct description of some aspect of reality and or a guide for successful human action. And there is only one reality. Is there anybody here who... There probably is. Is there anybody here who would like to make the point that there's more than one reality? Well, good. We have at least a semi-rational audience.
Question 8. You say there's only one reality and one valid theory. Why do you think all other bodybuilding theories are worthless?
Since there is only one reality, come on people, obviously there is and can be only one theory of any aspect of reality. Just as there is only one valid theory of epistemology, which is the theory of human knowledge, mathematics, electricity, chemistry, relativity, the theory of evolution. Likewise, there is and can be only one valid theory of productive bodybuilding exercise, and it just so happens to be the theory of high-intensity training. I don't have any weird emotional investment in this thing. It just so happens to be that the one valid, logical, non-contradictory, in fact, it's the only theory. The theory of high-intensity training is the only theory that exists qua theory, which means as the theory is defined. A set of abstract principles, logically connected, which purports to be a correct description of some aspect of reality. The science of exercise, ladies and gentlemen, like the science of medicine, is based on an understanding of the principles of human physiology with a capital H. That means they apply to everybody, after all. Unless Pollock and his people are here, I would say we're all members of the species human beings, which of course are universal. That is, applicable to all human beings. If every human being's cells, muscles, and were constituted and functioned differently, medical science couldn't exist as a viable discipline. Doctors couldn't make diagnoses, perform surgeries, or dispense medicines. It is this precise fact, the fact that the principles of human physiology are obviously universal, is what makes it possible for me to state with absolute, utter, total certainty that there is only one valid, logical theory of productive bodybuilding exercise, i.e., one best way to train. It is not my mere opinion that every human being, literally every human being, requires intense training to stimulate growth. It is a well-authenticated fact beyond debate. And because the magnitude of the toll demanded by high-intensity training is very great, such training must be not cautiously regulated, it must be hyper-cautiously regulated with regard to volume and frequency so you don't overtrain. Overtraining, remember, is not just a mistake. It's the biggest mistake you can make. Overtraining is literally that which prevents you from achieving the desired result. Increases in strength and size. And I'll talk more about that later. The major philosophic of this seminar, dear listeners, is that without a firm intellectual grasp of and guidance by a valid theory, one cannot know that he's on the right course. A sane individual setting out on a trip from New York to Los Angeles will consult a map. A map, interestingly enough, is a theory about how to get from point A to point B. Without the map, he would get lost, lose whatever certainty and motivation he may have had and terminate his effort along the way.
Question 9. You say knowledge, like any value, requires effort. Do you really think we need to grind this hard to understand bodybuilding science?
Knowledge, like any other value, has to be gained through a volitional effort, an act of choice. Anyone smart, anyone here today, and it's all of you, smart enough to learn the ABCs, write a sentence, or read a book, can, with sufficient effort, integrate the knowledge he gains as a result of today's seminar. Now we get to the intense workout. Recently, one of my phone consultation clients expressed considerable astonishment that he had been able to realize so much uninterrupted progress utilizing heavy-duty, high-intensity training. And I explained to him, that should not be a surprise. There's no mystery here. That people have been growing muscles beyond normal levels for tens of thousands of years. That we live in a knowable, rational universe of clear-cut identity, guided by one set of never-changing principles, and that the cause and effect, this is a key concept for those who want to learn to think logically about exercise or anything else, cause and effect. The cause and effect relationship between intense exercise and muscular growth has been understood for at least decades by a few people at least, even though the vast majority of so-called experts in this field have failed to grasp it. I concluded by pointing out to this individual that it is reality and its laws, the laws of nature, you know, that dictate the causes which must be enacted to affect the buildup of muscles beyond normal levels. And that once these causes, these natural laws, are clearly understood, in reality the task of developing bigger muscles, while of course requiring high-intensity effort, is really rather simple. Nature also dictates what mental causes. We were talking earlier, a second ago, about physical causes. Nature also dictates what mental causes that must be enacted to affect an intellectual understanding of any subject or issue. You must first recognize that all human knowledge has a nature. Your body has a nature, right? Your brain is a part of your body. Your mind is a part of your brain. Your brain and the knowledge therein has a nature, literally. Human knowledge, people, is hierarchical in structure, with a base of fundamental principles or ideas which must be first grasped before moving up the logical ladder. This may be most readily observed, of course, in the field of mathematical science. Now remember, we're here today to talk about exercise science, but we're talking something here in the abstract about the nature of knowledge itself. In mathematical science, or mathematical knowledge, there is a base of fundamentals, which of course are what? Addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. It is only on the basis of first grasping these fundamentals that one may then deal efficaciously with derivatives such as algebra and calculus. The major reason why you, or so many bodybuilders, are confused is that you fail to take the time to gain an understanding that the context of knowledge, which constitutes bodybuilding exercise science, has a base of fundamental principles. The major reason why most bodybuilders are confused is that they don't understand that the context of knowledge, which constitutes bodybuilding exercise science, has a base of fundamental principles. If you want to learn to think logically about exercise, which again is what I presume you came here for, this is the first thing you have to logically understand. That
Question 10. You talk about the fundamental principles of intensity, volume, and frequency. Why do you think these are the only keys to success and everything else is junk?
the body of knowledge constituting exercise science has a base a foundation of fundamental principles. And it ain't that difficult. So you might write this down for your own edification, which relate to the issues of intensity, volume, and frequency. Curious, I told you I talk to bodybuilders every day. Every single day I hear bodybuilders asking questions about training that are something like the equivalence of algebra or calculus when they have not even grasped the simple 2 plus 2 is 4 of bodybuilding. How in the hell are they going to answer the higher level questions when they can't even figure out the simple 2 and 2 is 4? The following, which you're about to hear, will help you gain that knowledge. A logical perspective, as I said earlier, on the subject of productive bodybuilding exercise. Audience, let's approach the subject of what makes muscles grow beyond normal levels like a good exercise scientist might. Now, you have to use your imagination here because I have yet to meet a good exercise scientist, but just use your imagination a little bit. Having observed innumerable bodybuilders and strength athletes work out, the alleged good exercise scientist concludes that there has to be something about the workout. He looks at these guys training. There has to be some variable, some element, something he can identify and say, hey, look, this particular thing, that's what makes muscles grow, right?